in terms of their thoughts on this process, and also how HESA have begun their kind of steps on that journey as well. In terms of us, is this the clicker?
Yeah.
So this is the order of events for today. We've got a huge amount of content. I think quite a lot of the content we're going to whiz through quite quickly, but the content is there if we need it, we can refer back to it. I've got everybody's details in terms of sharing that content with you afterwards, so it might be a slightly condensed version of what you see here today, but over the course of it will probably take around a week to come out to you, but we'll get that content out to you. That'll include the video and all of the slides today. We've built in quite a bit of contingency. If there is some lively debate, we want to make sure that we're dedicating as much time to that positive conversation as we can do. So we've got a couple of drinks breaks, and we've got a section at the end. David's given me some of his business cards. They're in the corner by that laptop there. There's not many of them there, so if the business cards run out, my cards are there as well. I can connect you to David following the event as well. In terms of us, Lenus, we started in 2018, at the back end of 2018. Essentially, we're a talent and workforce solutions consulting organisation. We do recruitment, that's a part of what we do, but we also do assessments, EVP, career transition, the total talent piece. And where we came into existence, I guess, is because a lot of larger organisations that maybe hire 1,000 permanent people a year, have 2,000 contractors, have this huge total talent capability from their providers, but there's no reason why everybody can't have access to that kind of innovation in the current marketplace. So a lot of organisations spend a huge amount of money, but also save a huge amount of money in the process as well, and really reduce their cost to hire. And that's where Lenus came into being, really. We've worked on those large international programs, and we've put some of these solutions in place. So as an example, we've got at the back of the room there's an iPad stand. That's got a psychometric test that we're launching it on Wednesday and Thursday this week at a show in London. It's specifically designed to benchmark the 5 key competencies of care home managers, and that's on behalf of a couple of our clients that wanted to use something a little bit different in order to help their attrition. So it's not just that recruitment aspect, it's how do you assess the people to bring them into the organisation to make sure that they're the right fit and that they're going to stay with you ultimately. We operate in the UK, across the UK. We also operate in France and Japan now. So we've got a number of different geographic territories, but we're based just outside Cheltenham. We're moving into a new office in Nailsworth, actually, which we signed up for last week. So we're very much regionally focused to this area as well. This is a little bit about what we do. We don't really consider ourselves to be an agency. We're more of a total talent provider. Within that, recruitment is a key part of that. We are more interested in programs and projects where we can wrap something up and add some real value to the organisation. We're lucky enough to be recruitment partners with HESA at the moment, and I think it would be fair to say Kate would say positive things.
Yeah.
Excellent. But that's enough about us. We've got a couple of slides at the end about something that may or may not be interesting, slightly off topic for you before you go. But without further ado, I'll hand you over to David.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. If you don't mind, I'm going to sit while I do this. Back injury, won't worry with the details. So thank you for spending a Monday morning talking about mental health. For me, that's really exciting. The fact that I've been involved here is indicative of the increase in conversation around mental health. The one thing I will say up front is that I don't have all the answers, and anybody that tells you that they do is, to use a phrase that is common these days, is spreading fake news. However, I will do what I can. Mental health is having a moment. It seems that mental health is all over the internet, social media, news reports, every day, pretty much. But I think to start, we need to take a slight pause and take a step back and actually go, what is mental health? Now, it might sound like an inane question, but does anybody have any thoughts on that? Does anybody have any words that may come to mind when you think of the phrase mental health? We're in a safe space. You can be politically incorrect if you like, because trust me, I've heard them all. But are there any words that you associate when you think of mental health as a phrase?
Anxiety.
Anxiety, yeah. Stress, yeah.
Depression.
Depression, yeah.
I think you've got to think about it as got good mental health and bad mental health. I think we historically think of it as being a negative.
Very good. Gold star.
There's normality. I mean, we all operate within a bandwidth, don't we, which is acceptable if you like, but as soon as we go one way or the other, we're kind of either two up or two down, perhaps.
Yeah, very good. Well done, Klaus. Any other contributions at that point? Okay, well, you are all right. What's interesting to consider is this, which is the World Health Organization's definition of mental health. A positive sense of well-being, and I will come back to that word later. A lot of these statements, what they're highlighting is that you are part of something bigger than just yourself. It's not just you as an individual. We live in a very individualised society these days. So it's important to consider us, or the people that you are working with, in a wider context. Does that make sense, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah. I think one of the interesting ones, especially with the work that we do, is the last one, the ability of the mind to recover from shock and trauma. What we don't know is why you and I may experience something really negative in our lives, the same experience, and you are able to recover from that, are not. We don't know. We don't know why that is particularly. But it is important that we consider mental health on a spectrum. Some statistics for this week. 104 people will take their own life. I will also say without apology that I get quite hung up on the language that is used when we talk about mental health. Still, the phrase commit suicide is used. I would urge you, if you take nothing else away from today, that you don't use the word commit. Commit implies a negative. All suicide is tragedy. At the end, first and foremost, an individual who ends their life by suicide is not committing an offence and hasn't done since 1961. So we just need to make sure that we break away from that sort of language. 250,000 people will visit their GP about a mental health problem, and nearly 71 million antidepressant items were dispensed in England in 2018. I don't say that with any side to it. These are just figures and statistics to point out that people with mental health challenges are common. One of the most common phrases that you may hear is that 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health difficulty in any given year. And that's statistically true. I tend to turn it on its head and say actually 4 in 4 of us have mental health. We all have mental health in this room. There isn't a dividing line where all of that's mental health and all of that's physical health. One impacts on the other. And causes of mental health, goodness me, all sorts of things. A few highlights here. Biological part, just to put some context on that, your brain, that lump of grey matter that sits in the top of your skull, merrily doing its thing without you thinking about it, is the most complicated thing in our universe. To put that in context, if you took a little bit of your brain the size of a grain of sand, that little bit has 10,000 neurotransmitters in, which are these magic cells which send signals to one another, and each one of those 10,000 is connected to 10,000 more. So it isn't, there's a reasonable argument to be had that sometimes the wiring might go wrong. Genetics, lots of work around genetics at the moment. We haven't found a smoking gun, which that's where the problem lies. There are some interesting studies with identical twins, and from that they've extrapolated that if you have a close blood relative with a significant mental health issue, statistically you are more likely to experience a mental health issue yourself. The last two we see in our work are quite common causes of mental health issue. A lot of the people that we work with have experienced some form of trauma during their early years, and that's had potentially a lifelong impact on their mental well-being. Also consider physical health problems, medication, as in prescribed medication, drugs, as in illicit drugs, and alcohol. Alcohol is very commonly used as a coping strategy if you're stressed. The problem is that alcohol itself is a depressant, so if you are already experiencing low mood and are using alcohol as a coping strategy, you're actually making the situation worse. One that's often missed is sleep. Now that's not about having 8 hours necessarily of high quality sleep every single night, because we all have our own pattern and rhythm around sleep. But from that, which I think will be, I hope, will be interesting. Bearing in mind the context that I mentioned earlier and the commonality of mental health issues within our society, they have provided a financial cost, the burden of mental ill health on the workforce, between 33 and 42 billion pounds a year across the country, which is staggering to me. There's also a knock-on cost to government through people having to potentially claim some form of ill health benefit, for example. Again, some really huge figures. Hi, morning.
Hi, sorry.
Okay, welcome. Do come in, Hannah. Thanks for coming. And a total cost to our economy in this country of somewhere between 74 and 99 billion pounds a year. Can't even necessarily work out how many zeros are at the end of that, but it's a vast amount of money. So just like with the wider community, organisations, companies need to be interested in this for your own benefit as well as for the people that you employ. Some of these statements will sound self-evident, but I think it's important to make sure everybody is clear on the impact of a workforce. Stress I'm going to come back to, but you will know your own companies and potentially what the statistics are around your absenteeism and the reasons for that. I think we do need to have more open conversations about mental health. And I think if that is led, in this context, by employers, that sends out a hugely positive message, not only to the people that you employ directly, but to the wider community. Because there is not a disconnect between the two. One of the things that the Stevenson Farmer report highlighted was the discrepancy between how well managers feel they support staff and how well the staff feel that they are supported. And I think that's an important area that we need to reflect on. It's about knowledge, but it's also about being comfortable saying, I don't know. And that can be a challenge as an employer. But I think the important thing to remember is that there are other people, like organisations like mine, who are able to support you as an employer with that very issue. The other thing that was made clear through the report was that employers should invest more in workplace well-being to benefit the bottom line, because ultimately healthy and successful companies will continue to employ the people that may be experiencing mental health issues, as well as everyone else. Some of the benefits, economic benefits, reducing the risk of litigation. It's important to recognise as employers that there are legal responsibilities placed on you. Again, there will be some links at the end around the rules and regs that are imposed by the Health and Safety Executive around stress in the workplace, and how, as employers, you have responsibility to mitigate that and to be able to evidence it. I think it's also important to remember that this is and you mentioned it, David, that this is a journey as an employer that you take. So investing in training and development is part of that process to make you a mentally healthy organisation. From that, the outcomes are that you have a better experience for your customers, your clients, whatever words you've used with that. And you are going to reduce costs around sick pay, sickness cover, if that's relevant, overtime, recruitment, all of those things. Because it's important to recognise this also as an opportunity for your organisations to be better than you may be at present, but also it's an opportunity to show the wider community from whom you will be recruiting that you are an exemplar organisation. And that would be one of my challenges back to you as companies. How do you transform into being a company that members of the public who are looking for employment look at your company and go, oh, actually, they sound really good when it comes to this area of support, because that is a golden opportunity.
David, who are those, when you think about that kind of type of organisation, who comes to your mind?
There aren't many, and I think the problem is that it's hidden. You don't shout about it. So whilst I can give you one. So I'm based in Hereford. So there are a couple of organisations over there. One's a higher education organisation, Hereford College of Art, and I would classify them as an exemplar organisation. But they do promote the fact. So I think actually as organisations, possibly one of the areas to consider is promoting the work that you do to support your workforce more publicly? I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah, I know it's a difficult question to necessarily answer, but that's an interesting point. Thank you.
So talking about the impact on your staff, these are some of the areas that have been highlighted through the Stevenson Farmer report. Improved motivation. If an individual feels supported in their workplace, they're going to be happier in the broader sense of the term and more motivated. Positive staff morale, increased staff performance. Now, at an organisational level, it's worth considering how you record and report that sort of data. And is it done at all? But equally, is it done in a meaningful way? And do you communicate that with your workforce? Because there needs to be a circular process within this. It's not about, this is my area of the company, and you need to be able to broadcast this information. Increase commitment to the organisation. Again, we come back to staff churn, attrition. And it's also, at a functional level, about management being able to show and prove the duty of care, the responsibilities and the HSE requirements as a company that you have to adhere to. And it's also a development opportunity as managers. So bear that in mind as well. Doing further training, improving the performance of your company through this sort of work will look great for you. So we do all of this work, and some of the benefits are listed here. Reduction in staff turnover, improved absence, fewer days lost to sickness and absenteeism, less risk of accidents. Because if you have a workforce that's incredibly stressed or depressed, any of the other words that you want to associate with poor mental health, there can be a higher risk of accidents, improved quality of work, positive organisational image and reputation, which is what I was saying a moment ago. You're doing the right thing, and you'll seem to be doing the right thing. My other challenge, I guess, is you need to be doing it for the right reasons, because this is about dealing with human beings. It's great to do all this work, and you can present to your boss that the improvement in any one of these particular measures, but you need to mean it. Because ultimately we're dealing with people, and broadly speaking, your companies would literally be a name above a door without the people that you employ. So doing the right thing for the right reason is absolutely fundamental to this work. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Okay. I've mentioned health and safety executive, and I just wanted to just to talk about this for a moment. Again, there were links on the slides. The management standards, as it says, represent a set of conditions which demonstrate good practice. And the second one is quite interesting to me, allow assessment of the current situation, so that you are continually looking at improvement. How do I change? How do I move forward? Where are the issues within my company, and what can I practically do about them? Okay.
Do you have any good examples of how employers have done that?
Because for it to stick, your employees need to know that you're serious about this stuff, and you are going to followed through on it. And it also, as it says here, helps simplify risk assessments, work-related stress, return to work interviews, all of those processes that you have in place can be improved and streamlined using the HSE best practice and guidelines. Don't see it as a hurdle that you have to jump over, because I think getting this right proves that you are going to be that exemplar organisation when it comes to supporting your staff. So, we've done some legal stuff. We've talked about the Stevenson Farmer Review, creating a mentally healthy workplace. These are some of the headlines that came from the Stevenson Farmer Report. Providing the message that staff mental health is valued, so that you aren't just a number on payroll, for example. So we, as an organisation, I like to think a specialist in this area, recommend a three-pronged approach. Promoting well-being of staff, and again, I'm not going to jump on what Kate's going to talk about, but I would take particular note of some of that work that Kate's organisation has done, but also be open about tackling the causes of work-related mental health problems. Now, I will give you an example. Quite commonly now, organisations will have some form of EAP scheme available. So an employee approaches their line manager, HR, whatever the process is, and explains that their mental health is not as good as they want it to be, to use fairly generic terms. And you go, okay, well the good news is we have an EAP programme, and through that you are able to access free counselling. That's great. That's fantastic. Because the NHS, God bless it, offers some fantastic services with talking therapy, but like with many other areas of the NHS, you can be waiting a considerable amount of time. So that's a great route into talking therapy. So you, as an employer, send your employee off on those 6 or 8 sessions of counselling. The question mark is, what's the root cause? Now, if we go right back to the start around some of the causes of mental health, it may not be anything to do with what's going on at work. But if it is work-related, what are you as the employer, the manager, whatever role you take, what are you doing potentially about the issue that has driven that individual to seek help with their mental health? Because the employee goes off and has their counselling and comes back, but if the problem has not been addressed in the workplace, what was the point? So I think it is important that you challenge yourselves as employers to look at this openly and frankly, and if there is a problem, deal with it. Because not only have you got the requirements at a human level, it is the right thing to do. Okay with all of that? So if we just look at these points a little further, promoting well-being, effective management and open dialogue, ensuring that the employees have an empowered voice, so that if they are going to speak up, they're not going to be judged. Because bear in mind, we're talking about mental health, and even in 2019, on a daily basis, people that are experiencing mental health problems face stigma all the time. So it's important as an organisation that you look at that, because that is included in the next point around workplace culture. Now, you may be entirely open and happy to to converse with your employees about that, but what about their colleagues? It's about making sure that that environment is healthy. Raising awareness and promoting discussion. Again, have a look at the work that HESA have been doing on that. And encouraging a good work-life balance. These things are fifth limbs now, whether we like it or not. But lead by example and go, it's okay not to be looking at your emails at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Because it's too easy. And actually the world didn't stop turning before we had all this stuff. You know? Tackling the causes of work-related mental health problems. These are just some examples, and I'm sure this doesn't necessarily relate to any of the companies that you're representing, but being alert to the triggers. So if you're going to go through organisational change, be aware of the mental health burden that may put on your employees that may be affected in that process, including things like lack of management support. You need to be there for the staff that you employ. Okay. And then the third one is providing support to staff with mental health problems. Now this isn't about you as employers becoming armchair psychiatrists. I think educating yourselves is really important, and this might be the start of that process, depending on where you are. But making sure that you are open and honest. So if an employee comes to you with experiencing mental distress, if you don't know what to do about that, say so. Obviously back it up by saying, I'm going to go and find out. But just to be open and honest about it. Everyone's experience of a mental health problem is unique. Again, that might sound like stating the obvious, but it's about listening to an individual. And it's not just about listening, it's about hearing what that individual's got to say, and there is a difference. But supporting them in a practical way to go, okay, what can we do as the employer to support you whilst you are experiencing this mental distress, together with the support that you are receiving either through you as the employer or the NHS or the wider community. Things like a personal action plan, identifying triggers. That work takes time to put in place, but it, over longer term, can be really beneficial, And having clear policies on that. Workplace adjustments quite commonly are considered for people that might have a physical disability or are coming back after, I don't know, major surgery or something, and you think that, is your desk chair okay, and do you need something? But actually we need to consider that in terms of mental health. What do you need to support your return to work? I've already mentioned EAP programs. Some of you may have occupational health, I believe. Did you mention you have a mental health nurse on site? Okay. And also accessing psychological therapists. So again, at an individual company level, it would be, I would argue, it would be beneficial for you to know what mental health provision is like outside of your organisation. And people like us can support you to put that database together so that you understand the challenges of access to psychological support outside of the 9 to 5. Everybody okay with that? I've just put some links and references again that I believe, David, the slide deck is going to be shared with everybody here. If you want to find out some generic information around mental health conditions, for example, our national website, on the landing page, has something called the Mental Health A to Z, which does what it says on the tin. And all of the information there is downloadable as PDF, so that can be quite useful. I've mentioned the Stevenson Farmer Report, HSE and Management Advisory Service. The other one I would also mention, which isn't listed on here, is a website that we nationally have put together, which is mentalhealthatwork.org.uk. You'll find a whole host of free resources there, like free, but also links to local, as we refer to, local minds such as ourselves, who are able to come and support you as companies to make sure that you get this work right. There's also some really interesting information. The internet's a great place, but it can also be a really dangerous place when it comes to talking about mental health, so it's important that you know where you're looking is safe. So these are some of the websites that we endorse. And it's an international response, as you can see from that. You can also get in touch with us directly. As David mentioned, we've got some business cards and we're all over social media. I wanted to just finish with, so again.
The thing is, we all have mental health, but where and how we live shapes our well-being. And mental illness can affect you, me, or anyone. We need a new mindset. 1 in 4 of us at some point in our lives will have a mental health condition. Every 40 seconds, a person dies from suicide. And mental ill health costs the world $2.5 trillion every year. No matter where you are, mental health has been overlooked and underfunded. But we can turn all this on its head. Most mental health conditions are preventable or treatable. It's time to put mental health at the top of the agenda with the funded research and resources it urgently needs. Let's create a world where everyone, everywhere, has someone to turn to in support of their mental health. The effect will transform our future, our schools, our businesses, our communities, whole countries, in fact. Because if we change our attitude to mental health, we change the world.
Thanks, Ken. Questions, ladies and gentlemen? Does anybody have challenges or anything that they would like to ask?
Some employers, I understand, don't like to engage too much in dealing with the problem in case they're sort of holding themselves open as liable to litigation or something. Is that an issue?
It's like if we don't know about it, then it's not happening kind of argument. And I can understand that, and I've heard all sorts of different opinions from a range of stakeholders within HESA, and that is one that I've heard, not from anyone senior on that. And the response is that it's happening anyway. So if you know it's happening, then it's happening. You have to deal with it. Pretending it's not, you'll ultimately be faced with something bigger than something that's maybe under an undercurrent. You'll be dealing with a big problem if you don't deal with it earlier on and intervene earlier on, because you know it's happening. Unless your organisation magically bucks the trends of society, then there's an issue to deal with, whether you want to deal with it or not.
I was going to say, I think I work for the Coventry Building Society, and I think we're actually doing a lot of the things that you said. We're trying to be famous for looking at well-being at work. We've got loads of initiatives. I think we're tackling these things. We've got the EIP, we do everything else, return to work and everything else. I do think mental health can be quite contentious, though, as in, I don't, any absence is true absence, but I think there are people that possibly take advantage of it's not a physical illness, therefore will go to their doctors, be suffering to be able to stay off work or keep off work. And I think that's a really hard one to manage.
Yeah.
True mental illness and not so. Do you see that?
Yeah, that's a really tough one.
It's a really tough one,
cynical.
and I think doctors, it's tough for doctors as well to diagnose it, because it is so easy these days for staff to go into the doctors and get signed off from work. It really is quite, it's quite easy. We see it a lot of the time. I think I work in the lending operations, and at the moment I think we've got 11% of the staff had over 20 days off in the last year. And most of that is down to stress, anxiety, depression. And there's some really, really genuine causes there, but I think it's quite a difficult one as well.
That one's really tough. I think we've operated at HESA, a trust-based culture. So I went to a really good talk, and it wasn't about mental health or sickness, but it was about HR generally. And a woman said something that really hit home with me, which is that if you create rules around to deal with those people, the fake, people that create rules around particular individuals, you end up putting everybody else.
Exactly. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. We do
punish everybody.
We do take every illness as genuine, but you can, as a manager of a site of 60 people, you can see the differences. I'm not saying we treat those people individually, any differently, but it is quite a hard one. I think there is a lot of that that's lost out in the business world through not so genuine absence. But we do support those individuals, and we have BUPA referrals if staff come back into the workplace to see if we need to look at adjusting the absence triggers, because they've had periods of long-term sick and they're more likely to suffer from absence. So we really do everything we can, but it's one of those things as well that you can see the difference, or you can see that happening in the workplace as well. But if anyone else has found similar.
The thing I would add to that, and like in any context, you are going to get people that fake it.
Yeah.
Because that's human nature. I think what I would say is that you don't know whether they are or not at a fundamental level, because you don't know what might be going on for that individual outside of the workplace. Because if it's not something that potentially is triggered by something that's going on at work, that individual may not want to talk to you about it.
We've got quite an open culture where I would say at the moment in the last 12 months I've probably had 4 individuals in my own office that have been off for long-term absence periods, and none of it's been work related. It's all been something outside of work, which they've been quite happy to discuss with their managers. So we do have quite an open.
Sure, but I think it's about recognising that for some people, talking to their employer about whatever it is a step too far for them, because it can be frightening. People are fearful of that stigma that maybe you don't. No matter what message you give out that it's an open culture and you won't be judged, individuals will have that potential, will have that fear.
Something to add to that, engaged employees that get on with their teammates, have a good relationship with their line manager, and are doing a job that they enjoy doing, will generally turn up to work if they're well and won't do those things. So what we've introduced, and we're just trying it in one area of the business, is a more in-depth back to work interview with people, where we actually talk through those particular elements that are related to whether people have come into work or not. So we say, a high sickness level can be linked to, so we're not blaming people, but can be linked to, and it's on the form, bad working relationships, unenjoyable work, bad relationship with the manager. And actually we've got that printed, where it's old-fashioned sometimes here, and we have it printed on a piece of paper, that the person and their line manager sit together and go through this So that the line manager's asking them, how are your working relationships? How is the work? Are you finding it enjoyable? And so that you get those elements out of that discussion as well. So it's a more well-rounded discussion. So it's not about, are you lying or are you telling the truth? But it's about how engaged are you in your work, and then how can we help you to resolve some of those issues?
Yeah.
Because there's always an underlying cause of someone choosing to be absent from work, whether it's a mental health condition or a physical condition or childcare issues, or just really not liking their job, or not feeling that anybody really notices if they turn up or not. There's always something. Generally, people aren't really going to take the mickey that much because they know they're letting their peers down or somebody down in doing that. And I choose to believe that most people aren't within.
We have quite comprehensive return to work package. Maybe we're missing out on the elements of work because we do the wellness action plans and other bits and pieces, like I said, the Bupa referrals, we've got the EAP if people need to use it. We will look at flexible working if someone's returning to work and too much. So we do cover off, but maybe the more direct questions about work is something we need to consider as well.
It might help, and you do sometimes get like a snowball effect, don't you, where somebody goes off and then other people that are maybe a little bit disenfranchised, so they got some time off.
Yeah,
I want my days off. And it becomes a bit of a joke, doesn't it? I worked in an organisation before where people would be like, I've not taken my sick leave entitlement this year. Yeah? And
we had one individual that because we got quite a good package. Certainly if you've been there for 10 years, 6 months full pay, 6 months half pay. That's actually looking to change now to pay protection for the following 6 months, but for every employee over 5 years now, not 10 years. But we had a certain individual who would sort of have 3 months off and then come back around, sort of tally up their absence again, and then it'd be the same period almost every year. And we explored whether it was something that was triggering it. Her doctor explored whether it was something that was triggering it. Unfortunately, it seemed to be more, I hadn't used my absence up yet. And actually, when she returned to work, she did say to one of her colleagues some sort of comment about, "Oh, well, I'll be off at that time next year." So yeah. Which is, you can't
terrible.
bang to right. You can't do. But again,
But hopefully, that individual is the exception to the rule.
Absolutely. Oh God, yes. We're not talking about a huge problem.
No.
And the problem is those kinds of anecdotes can proliferate around an organisation. And then that organisation becomes quite a toxic place for the genuine meal because everyone knows about that person. People sort of triangulate it, and it's actually one person, but they think it's loads of people because they've all heard the story from different places. So it can be quite dangerous, I think. But and it's about dealing with that one individual. So when you know somebody is doing that, then it's tackling them, but not necessarily creating a rule that penalises everybody else.
David, so on the radio, on the news, on the TV, there's quite a lot of information around, empirical evidence to suggest that being outside in, a wood or a forest or just within some sort of nature situation and setting is just really positive for your mental health and well-being.
Yeah.
They can't really explain why, but they've got the evidence, they're just working backwards from there. And again, with diet, there's more and more in the news around, particularly with children's nutrition and how that can have an effect. And it feels to me like we're at the
evidence around those two areas. And again, I referenced our national website. There's a whole heap of results on those two areas and there's many others. We also talk about something called 5 Ways to Wellbeing. Come across that. I'm going to just see if I can find a link whilst I'm talking. Which is quite simple, but it covers off an awful lot of this these key areas. So let me just and I can share this. So if we go back to at the start of my slides about the WHO definition of mental well-being, We've got connect, and that can mean connecting with your peers, with family, wider community, next door neighbour, whoever it might be, but being part of something bigger. Taking notice, and that very often links into being outdoors, physical activity, but yeah, just, you know, you walk out of your front door and look up. It's very, it sounds really simple, but actually it's quite fundamental to maintaining mental well-being. Keep learning. That might be sort of work environment. It might be outside of work. It might be learning to play a musical instrument. It could be anything. Giving. So that's about doing something altruistic for someone else. Fundraising for Mind or whatever it might be. Quick plug. And being active. And there's a whole host of resource. If you search for 5 ways to wellbeing, there's a whole host of resource behind that, which is the research part. But it's true, and it's a bit like, you know, you mentioned nutrition, and you know, there's a whole, it seems to be multiple programs on TV about diets and all of that. And actually, what it boils down to is having a healthy balance of things, and that includes work. And again, I reference, you know, these things and checking your emails at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. It is about balance.
And we have fruit and bacon sandwiches in the back of the room.
So we're hitting our 5 a day already. But a lot of this is not rocket science. It really, really isn't. It is common sense in the broad sense. And all of those things contribute to an individual's well-being, whether that be mental or physical. But,
yeah, it seems to be more prevalent in the news.
Yeah.
And I can remember somebody on Radio 5 quite recently kind of talking about it. They didn't have the basis of the information that backed it up. They just kind of, you know, were interested in the topic. So it seems to be something that's been around for a long time in terms of that nutritional kind of nature aspect.
Yeah.
But it's something that the people seem to be talking a little bit more about and exploring.
Yeah, there is a whole host of research around ecotherapy. It's a sort of catch-all title as well. There is a report that came out recently with evidence that being outdoors for 1 hour a week has a positive impact on your mental well-being. It's not hiking miles and what have you, but simply being outdoors.
1 hour per week.
I'm going to say this. Is there anyone that doesn't say it's like 1 hour per week?
Per week. 1 hour per week. Yeah. But so that I mentioned that mental health is on a spectrum, and it's balanced with our physical well-being as well. So just being outdoors, so you are absorbing you're absorbing vitamin D, which is fundamental for your mental well-being. And of course, these days we walk outside and the first thing we do is slap on the factor 50 whenever we see that yellow shiny thing in the sky. And you know, all of a sudden there's an increased prevalence of vitamin D deficiency. So yeah, it's all about balance.
I would totally agree with you. We're lucky enough to sort of have a very nice area, and there's nothing that makes me feel better but mentally than being outside, taking the dog for a walk along the common, looking down the Stroud Valley.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place, and it really does make me feel better about it. And that's just an instant, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can extrapolate that to the population at large. So, yeah.
I'd just be interested in your thoughts around how this topic of well-being in general links closely with sort of neurodiversity and recognising that everyone is different, but also there are defined mental health issues or learning disabilities or learning issues, and just understanding how the two are intertwined.
That's a good So, again, referencing how we categorise things back at the start, and I mentioned this thing called the DSM. So some learning disabilities are detailed within that, as are organic brain change diseases such as Alzheimer's and dementia. So there's a huge amount of controversy around that currently. As again, it's the conversation, the debate, and the medical research moves over time. I think you mentioned neurodiversity. Again, increasingly we are seeing issues with, for example, mental health issues linked to gender and sexual orientation. When you lift the lid on that, quite often the issues related to that are the response by others to the individual. So homophobia, transphobia, bullying, and that's a pretty damning indictment in 2019. We should be better than that. But there's a huge amount of debate still. Another big area is around something, a diagnosable mental health issue called personality disorder. Hugely controversial, and the big brains internationally that write up the DSM are actually talking about whether that's a thing or not. So it's difficult to be able to go, it's that, because there's still a huge amount of debate.
I also wonder just around, just thinking about it in the context of Dyson, where we've grown a huge amount in the last 3 or 4 years in particular. I think we've almost doubled in size in about 4 years. And then there's a huge amount of change, both across new sites being set up around the world, and then the older sites being revamped and new buildings being built to accommodate new areas of business and the growth in population and so on. And I just wonder how, whether there are any similarities in approaches to try and improve mental well-being, as much as making it a more comfortable and interesting, enjoyable sort of place for everyone, no matter whether they've been diagnosed with any kind of mental health problem or not, and just trying to get the best out of everyone and access the gifts and skill sets of every individual. I just wonder.
You raise a really interesting point, and again, if I could just broaden that out a little, with regard to recruitment. Now, obviously, people do not have to disclose medical conditions now. But so, if you employ somebody, at that point, if they say to you, "I need to disclose that I have this diagnosis, so that as the employer you are able to support me with that," what's your response at a corporate level?
It's not right, but alarm bells. But I know you can't discriminate against that.
No, but I think that the language needs to change, and picking up the comments that you made, it's actually about opportunity, because quite often people are people. And the fact that you might have got a diagnosis, leaving aside the legalities of not being formally able to discriminate or anything like that, actually what you may have got is a golden opportunity to employ somebody that's got such deep insight into who they are that they can support you, for example, with your HR function, to respond to people that might be experiencing mental distress in your organisation. It's a golden opportunity.
We've just done that through the GEM project, not with mental health, although we did I did interview, we did have some CVs through people that had been through the Nelson Trust or, depression or situations. In fact, I did actually interview a couple of individuals that had mental health issues, I believe.
Okay.
But again, so we've just not had mental health, but we've had a profoundly deaf lady and a visually impaired chap, and it's been a huge learning curve for us as a society. So absolutely, you're right, in the same spectrum, you could just learn a lot from that individual.
Absolutely. And they would bring an awful lot to your organisation. So I think it is about being positive about that.
There are a couple of things, just one thing. There was a couple of things in a previous organisation I worked in. We did an office refurb. And so part of that office refurb, I did do some research into the impact of different working environments on mental health and health in general. And there is a bit of a backlash against the open plan working environment. It's not great for some individuals that need time out and need to be on their own somewhere quiet, and find that too alarming, actually, having all the noise and the chatter around. And they would have a variety of either physical or mental health or learning needs that have been diagnosed. And having those people in the workplace and contributing, and actually we took one of them on afterwards into a permanent role with us, massively increased the understanding of the rest of the workforce, who generally probably walked the shops and maybe saw somebody that they thought might be different and then carried on and didn't know how to say hello to somebody, to a whole workforce that were actually comfortable engaging with people with those wide range of differences. And often you go through life and you're uncomfortable. People are uncomfortable, so they don't talk to people, or they don't engage with people. And just doing something like that, quite simple, actually helps a whole group of sort of 180 people suddenly develop a little bit more understanding and a little bit more comfort in being open to people that were different to themselves. So there's a couple of things that you can do practically in that area.
Guys, we're going to take a quick break now because we are overrunning, and breakfast seminar will turn into a lunch seminar pretty soon. So let's just take 5 minutes now. If you've got any questions, Kate David will be there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Happy to speak to you. And we'll crack on going in 5 minutes.
I have been doing this for me, I literally kept walking off and doing everything.
Right, everyone, let's start on again. This is Kate Beaches, people over at HESA, our hosts. Where is you?
Great, thank you. Right, okay, so I'm going to talk you through what we have been doing at HESA to develop a mental health strategy, ideas about what we're going to do, and a framework to put that within that I found useful when I was working on developing our mental health strategy. So first things to look at the context of the organisation, because you need to know your organisation inside and out to kind of work out what's going to sit well within it and what's not going to sit well, and how you're going to promote this and push this forward successfully. So one way of looking at it is this. So you look at, first of all, the culture. So how open or closed is your culture? What's your employee or employer, I've seen it both ways, value proposition? We worked actually with Lennis to develop our employee value proposition, because I had an idea in my head about what the culture was, but that was just my opinion based on everyone being really nice, weirdly, to the head of people and organisational development. And I needed to get some other viewpoints about what that culture was. What's your strategy? So you, Dyson, have got a growth strategy, which, I don't know, is that a stable strategy, or is it really unpredictable? Unpredictable. Yeah, I'd say most of us are operating in a VUCA environment, which is volatile, uncertain, something else, I can't remember. But the environment that we're working within as organisations is very volatile, so it's difficult to have a stable strategy in any company, but there might be some that are, or traditionally have, and are now moving to become more unpredictable. But that will tell you how you're going to pin this strategy, whether you're going to pin your mental health strategy or approach to a strategy, or whether that's just too unpredictable to do that with, whether you need to do something separate to that. Or are you actually retracting as an organisation, and therefore you're about to launch a mental health campaign whilst at the same time potentially downsizing, which can be a difficult one to deal with and can lead to some cynicism in your organisation. You need to look at your leaders and whether they are people-focused and collaborative or task-focused and authoritarian, because you need to treat them like stakeholders, really. So there's two ways of looking at this. One, in terms of how am I going to get their buy-in to this and the resources that they own, but the other about how I'm going to work with them to get that message out through them, because they need to be role models, don't they, of this, but they also need to be telling staff that this is important and you need to engage in it, and telling managers that they need to engage in it, and that maybe managers' own development within that organisation is going to be dependent on them demonstrating that they're working in ways that support their staff, that they're working according to the HSE management standards of stress, for example. You could have a really task-focused and authoritarian group of senior leadership team, and that actually, you could use that could be really good, because if you promote to them the pure business economic reasons for doing this, and they drive that down through the organisation, and the organisation accepts that leadership like that, and they are saying, this is important, you must do it, people probably will do it for that reason alone. Generally, I hope that you've got people focused, or at least a few people focused, people on your senior management team that you can work with on this. You need to look at your policies. So what's already in place in terms of flexible working, EAP, occupational health, social stuff. You were talking about the importance of sort of connections, ensuring that you've got social activities available to people. Agile working, that's an environment that we have. So we work, we have a number of scrum teams who are working in an agile way, and that can be really helpful because you actually plan the work properly, what's actually deliverable within a short period of time, and then deliver that. And then you have a retrospective where you sit and you talk about what went well and what didn't, and working relationships, and then you take a breath and then you move on. But these are all elements that you may have within your organisation or not that you may want to consider, but it's taking a view of what you've already got. Stakeholders, these can often surprise you. So I found when I was developing the strategy at HESA, the chief exec was totally on board. Actually, had sent me off to go and do some work in this area. But staff forum, who were the employee reps, were a little bit cynical. And a member of our staff forum said, "Well, I'm not going to go and talk to a mental health first aider. Absolutely no way." And there is, well, there's nothing to do with work. It's nothing to do with work. What's going on in my head? I do not want to talk to somebody at work about my problems, if I had any. So you can get some interesting opinions from you. You think these people are going to be sort of your avenues of support. They're going to help you push this forward. And sometimes you get challenged in areas that you don't expect. You need to think about potentially your thought leaders. So these are people that maybe don't have power traditionally. They're not a manager. They don't hold any budget. They're not on your employee voice board or as a trade union rep. But they have the power because everybody listens to them as to whether something's a good idea or not. So if you can get them on board with what you're planning on doing, then it's more likely to thrive and work. Your board need to be interested in this. It does help, as you said, it's trendy at the moment. So you'll tend to find your board are on board with this. And your HR team, look at them and make sure that they're skilled and equipped to be able to take this forward, and that they're given the training that they need. Look to the horizon. What have you got coming up? So if you're about to launch a mental health strategy or wellbeing initiatives to staff, if you do that at the same time as downsizing, like I said earlier, think about how that's going to land with people, because some people would be like, right, so okay, so they're offering me yoga on a Wednesday at the same time as they're telling me I'm at risk of redundancy. Yeah, it's not great. So you have to think about the right time to do something. Saying that, there is never probably a perfect time to do this. You're better to do something than nothing, but just pick it carefully. And then look at yourself. So, do you have the capacity and the capability to lead or push this forward, if that's what you're intending to do at the end of today? And what's holding you back, and what support can you obtain in doing it? So you can work with people like Mind to help you to develop a strategy in this area. If there's a capacity issue, because this takes time, then you need to think about who else you can get involved in delivering this. So, for example, I worked with the Staff Forum, and I've got them to do quite a lot of the work with me. I've worked with my colleague Jill, there's only two of us, to put this together. You're going to do this now for yourselves, okay? So what I'm going to give you, and then I'll share mine. So you show me yours, and then I'll show you mine, okay? So I'd like you to have a think about your own organisational context, and what you've got in place that supports, and what you've got in place that you need to work on. Do you like one? Just one you? Yeah, you should have one.
Thank you. Giving David one.
You can come and get it. Right. So, just 5 minutes on your own first. Just write down what you did, and then 5 minutes to talk to the person next to you. And if you work together, maybe talk to someone else.
I'm going to be pretty boring.
So-
I'm woefully unqualified for this conversation.
You can extract yourself from it if you like.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah.
I think we've just got to think about our organisation
And what we've got.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So do your own analysis, and I'll share with you my analysis, okay?
Of this company.
Right.
Really lucky. We have got a really open, friendly and helpful culture. So people will, I joined and 50 people walked up to me, and because I do go to a lot of coffee, so 50 people walked up to me at the coffee machine and were like, "Hi, how are you? You know, it's nice to see you," and welcome, introduced themselves to me. Never worked anywhere like that, but people do that. And then we've got a fairly introverted workforce, but they're an introverted. There's a data scientist and technology people, but they are incredibly friendly and open and want to get an interest in getting to know people and analyse things as well, quite a lot. So I've got a lot of really helpful people to help to drive this. And we did the EVP exercise, as I said, with Lennis, and that seconded my sort of impressions of the place, that it is open, it is friendly, it's sociable. As I said, our strategy became a bit less predictable due to external changes, so things that were beyond our control made our 5-year strategy, when I joined we were in the 2nd year, unrealistic, and so we're currently refreshing it. And so with that instability, you've got a workforce that are potentially unstable, because they're working on one big project and then they're diverted to another big project and then there's a change of direction. We have got a people-focused leadership, by and large, and that leadership, I was able to engage quite a lot of our leadership team to support this, including the chief exec, to support this activity and really get them to have a really good conversation in there with maybe those that needed to be brought along. We have got flexible working practices, we've got the EAP, we had really well engaged staff forums, so people had voice and were able to contribute. We had occupational health, and we had a social stroke charity, well, two, social group and a charity group, so people could get involved and do things that benefited the wider environment and local charities as well. And that really helps, actually, I think, with some form of well-being, is feeling like you're contributing to something bigger. And we had a mix of cynical and supportive stakeholders. So some people really on board, some people really cynical. Some people wondering if I was doing this because we were about to make loads of people redundant. That's what they actually thought. And no, we're not only nice when we're about to do something horrible, we can do something for bigger reasons than that. And on the immediate horizon, we have Chupi process and onboarding of a lot of employees for an organisation of 140, so an additional 30 people, plus so the Chupi of 30 people, an onboarding of an additional 30 people out, 30 people in, and then reskilling, like coming up really soon for people to be able to work differently, develop some more software development skills, all on the immediate horizon. So it's a difficult time to launch something, but actually we have to get on and launch something. And me, I was lacking capacity, and I definitely had gaps in learning. So I worked with an external consultant called Pete Quinn Consulting. I'll give you details of that if any of you want that, because I didn't know that Mind do this. But he was brilliant and really, really helpful, but I wasn't aware that Mind did this service and could help as well. And he helped me to sort of address the gaps in my knowledge and the gaps in the capacity to help me to think practically about practical things we could do. And then I took those practical things and ultimately developed a strategy as well. Okay, so in terms of preparation and planning, I've got there, enlist the support of a consultant, assess the content. You don't have to have a consultant, you can do it without, but it might be helpful. Gather the facts, so that's to help you make that argument to your stakeholders. You might want to think about so sickness, employee turnover, hours of work. You could do the HSE management standards for stress to look at that. So someone was asking about what information you would gather. You can with individuals do an individual stress questionnaire, and I use this with individuals when they have been absent from work or have reported a mental health issue. Is I ask them to complete voluntarily the HSE-based stress questionnaire to identify if there are any issues in the workplace that we need to address. And sometimes people will say to me, no, it's nothing to do with work. Well, let's just do this anyway and see if there's anything we need to pick up. But that's really useful data. And they may not share that with you, but you ask them to. And then they may not want you to share that with them and their manager, but most of the time they do. And that gives you some additional sort of information and an analysis and a backing to what you think is the issue, because you can identify particular areas of concern, whether that be the traditional workload or management relationships, or the fact they haven't got control over their working time, or they haven't got control over what they do, and they feel very constrained, or that they're bored. And that can be that can be as much of a cause of stress as having too much to do. So those are some of the things that you can look at. So it's the HSE, any employee engagement surveys that you already do, retention issues, you can highlight where those are in a particular area of business or not. So I'm not going to get you to do this because we're running low on time, but I've got a handout for you to take away. Can we do this? What I did was I looked at our HESA's existing practices. And I found this model, I don't know if it looked quite like this, but I found good old Google gave me something quite handy, which was to think about the activities that you do in terms of prevention, reaction and evaluation. And I really urge you to go and do this for your own companies, because I identified a big gap in evaluation, because it didn't link back to anything else. So we might publish our Bradford factor for the organisation. Does everyone know what Bradford factor is? It's a sickness measure which looks at the impact of the duration of sickness as well as the frequency. And so what you're saying is if you have an employee that takes 2 weeks off once a year, that's a bit tricky to handle, but you can generally cover it. If they have 1 day a month off, they are less predictable and the impact on the business could be bigger, because you just don't know if they're going to turn up or not. And it's having a bigger impact on the business, that kind of sickness can do, than someone having a planned sort of 2 weeks off with an operation, for example. but we published that. We didn't really, and there was no and so what? So what are you going to do about that? In terms of prevention, we have some great working practices. We've got really nice flexible working scheme, which our employees absolutely love because they get to bank hours and take up to 12 days a year holiday. We have an ex-employee in the room that I imagine might miss that. And we have that nice working environment, people that are, that are generally happy to work. In terms of reactive, we have that EAP, and you're right, it's like, well, what are you going to do about that information? And actually our EAP is ring yourself, and we tell people, ring it yourself, we will never hear what you've spoken to them about, or even that you've rung, or how many people ring it. And that's helpful for some issues, but actually if it's a work-related issue, you really want to know about it. And we have an occupational health scheme. It was them that got me started doing those agency management standard questionnaires with people. So this is the after. So we had that before, and this is the after. So we now have, we will have, so we haven't launched this yet, okay? So this is a spoiler. I've socialised this with lots of people, but not with all staff yet. Some managers are trying a different type of monthly one-to-one conversation template. It's the GOOD template. I can't remember what that stands for, but I will share that with you. It's like goals, something. It's good, anyway. But within there is an emphasis on having a conversation about people's workload and health and how they're getting on and what's going to stop them delivering what it is they want to deliver. And that some managers are starting to use that and finding that really helpful. It means that they feel that they're able to have those conversations. We are introducing mental health first aiders, and we're going to be promoting all the different avenues of support that people can go to support. In terms of evaluation, I'm going to be giving the staff forum stats every quarter. That's going to go to the board as well. We're going to be using the staff survey results and ASIC statistics to go to both of these groups, and then it's going to be that, and therefore this is what we're doing as a result of that, which is we often miss out. We ask people what they think, and then we don't do anything with it. And we've also set out sort of roles and responsibilities for each of the key stakeholders. So, as you can see, HR do a fair amount, but they're not doing everything. HR are not the whole company's sort of counselling service. I can't deal with that myself. It's too much of a mental load on me to carry everybody's problems with me, because I'm not very good at switching off and separating myself from it. And you'll get a copy of that. And I recommend you look at it this way as well, so that you're not taking this as something that HR do. And now we're doing a soft launch. So I've been socialising it bit by bit. We had some practical stuff within it, like no emails after 10 PM, and a meeting schedule where you cannot have back-to-back meetings in a day. I've managed to just about squeak the meetings through, but the no emails after 10 o'clock, absolutely. People are like, I can't do that. But what we're going to say instead is, nobody is expected to read them. So if it helps somebody because they're working flexibly, and actually they put their children to bed and then do their emails after that, and it helps them to work in that way and send it, then fine. But they must not expect anybody to reply to it. So, and that's through sort of talking to managers and talking to people about those expectations instead. But it's interesting that because I was able to sort of test it with different groups in the organisation, I was able to see how realistic these things were. If I hadn't done that and just gone out with, hey everybody, we're going to be doing this from now on, I would have had a massive backlash. So I was able to sort of contain that and rework on it. And the other thing I did was I worked with a brilliant comms person who put a brand new website together for us, which hopefully you'll be able to see in a second. She got really excited about it, and because she got excited about it, she developed this, which is like the best website we've ever done internally, using a new share from you as a company, rather than the other way around. She's worked out our mental health strategy here, Our staff forum came up with all of the support organisations. There's all sorts. There's Diabetes UK, Mind in there, Samaritans in there, and there's lots of other like, quite niche interest groups that they've added in there because they know that there are individuals that might actually need that support. So, and then they turned our strategy into a really nice looking web page that you can download and look at when they want to. So that's what we've done. We haven't launched it yet because I'm trying to find the right time to do it. And the important thing to do is to do it in an authentic way and in the right way for your own context. So in some companies that might be an all-staff meeting and the chief exec stands up and delivers it. In other organisations you might want to deliver it in different areas of the business and go and work through your heads of functional directors on that and do it in a different way. In other areas you might want your staff forum or reps or the trade union reps to get up and do it, or your first aiders, for example, to promote it. But creating an area where people can actually generate content to add to it. So hey, I've just found this website, I'm now going to keep an eye on that, make sure it's well checked. I found this might be really useful to you, is a really nice way of doing it. Creating polls within that area of what initiative should we have next. Do we do yoga or do we bring someone in to do neck massages or whatever, helps people to actually get involved and get engaged with this and keep looking at that content. So you'll get to see, so that was on the last slide. I haven't read it all out because I know I'm conscious about the time and I want to hand back to Lennis. But have you got any questions about what I've showed you so far?
I've got a question, Kate.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, obviously we helped you with the EVP. You mentioned that it reinforced some of the things that you kind of suspected about the organisation, but was it all reinforcement? Was there areas that were new that you hadn't sort of considered, and how does that weave into the mental health strategy?
There were some areas that were new. I think what was it? I can't remember. We had a discussion about some areas, didn't we? Because part we felt it was a little bit too sort of too salesy. But actually, it's going out to an external, potentially going out to an external audience that you want to sell your business to, don't you? As an employer, you want them to think it's great. And I think I remember you saying, well, you can't sell a place to work at just because it's like the people are nice. It needs to be a bit more than that. And I can't remember specifically what it was that surprised me about it. It validated what I thought in terms of the people are really important. I think someone had come up with work hard, play hard. Someone had said that to you. That disturbed me because I really don't like that expression at all. I think it's horrible. And we agreed that it wasn't one that would go into our EVP because it was inappropriate. We don't want a work hard, play hard culture. This isn't like some 1980s stockbroker film. It's a charity in Cheltenham. There's nowhere to play hard anywhere nearby anyway. So that was interesting. So you had a variety of opinions that were expressed that came out through that activity. Where it's really useful to have an EVP is to make sure that how you're presenting yourself externally to people who may want to work for you, that they're interested in that and they want to engage in that. It's all well and good employing someone countercultural to join your organisation deliberately, but you need to make sure that if you do that they're really well backed up and supported by other people around them, otherwise they're just going to feel really out on a limb, potentially bullied, or like they're in the wrong place and they just don't fit. So expressing your culture on your recruitment literature or your website or working with an agency that talk to candidates about what it's like working there means that people who like the sound of what it's like working there will want to go and work there, and people that don't select themselves out. And the more information that they get before they join, the better able they are to make that decision. It's not just about you deciding whether they've got the skills that you need, it's about them deciding whether they actually can tolerate working in that kind of organisation. At HESA, if you don't want to make cakes, you shouldn't come and join us. Because, not quite like that, but that it's that kind of environment where it's cakes and it's social and it's games and things like that, which make the place unique. If people don't really want to get involved in that, they might find that more, find themselves being quite quiet or isolated. Anything else? Any other questions? Shall I hand back to Sam?
My go. We are launching a new initiative at NESA. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes of your time, try to connect it to wellbeing at work, physically impossible. However, it does tie into a number of interesting things that might make the basis for the next seminar. So social value, helping to decrease gender pay gap, helping D&I stats. Essentially, we are looking at building a commercial software or digital skills training academy in Gloucestershire for local companies. Huge skills gap within digital. By the end of 2020, there's going to be 800,000 digital jobs in the UK unfilled. Not enough people going through formal training to be able to plug that. Average salary for a graduate software developer is £32,500 a year. Most of our clients can't afford that. So we had a bit of a think about ways that we can potentially tackle this problem and have come up with what we are calling working title the farm. So essentially we are turning the bootcamp model on its head. So if you want to become a software developer, you can sort of apply, you go through an interview, take some aptitude tests, pay your £9,000, go on a 12-week course, come out the other end, technically worth somewhere between £27,500 and £32,500, a qualified software developer. Now, that's great, but actually the boot camps that do exist don't train anything that's useful for our clients. They focus on sort of front-end app development, nothing useful particularly for HESA, which use a lot of SQL and C#. So we're turning the model on its head by, rather than putting students through a training course, we are having companies, clients, sponsor positions. Now they can recruit themselves, they can get an agency like us to recruit them, or one thing that's particularly interesting, Disney have done amazingly well, it's called Code Rosie. They took the aptitude test that all of the boot camps use, developed their own one, and they wanted to increase particularly their female population of software developers. So within the, I suppose, less qualified roles, so lots of admin teams, they asked anyone that might be interested to go through the aptitude test, and those that I suppose have had the horsepower to be able to do it, they then put through a bootcamp training program. And after about 6 months, they've now got 50 female software developers that are earning more on a better career track. That's created a whole load of social value as well as helped their D&I stats absolutely marvellously. So we are looking at potentially adopting that one with clients or clients that can sort of bring in their own people. So the ongoing training aspect, we're not just looking at putting together an 8 or 12-week program, sending someone back. It will be sort of follow-up, one-on-one, evening classes, group sessions to address specific problems, and it doesn't have to just be software. If clients come to us and say, right, we need 3 new BAs, can't find them, especially for what we want to pay. Great, okay, if we can find the interest, we can stand up the class, we can teach them. We'll look at a lot of the software development skills within Cheltenham, a lot of the companies seem to use. So we can probably put cohorts together around that. But I suppose it's our way of looking to address that skills gap and save money. Now, we think we can save, on average, £20,000 per person over 2 years doing this. So by our client sponsoring a position, bringing someone on, employing